Thank you for making this space, everybody. I don't get to come here very often, and so it's always really nice. Um, yeah, I haven't been invited to speak publicly for a while, and I didn't like prepare anything strict. I just have some notes if I get lost. But yeah, I'm coming from unceded territory of Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people, and the house that I'm currently living in, the room that I'm in is my room, um, is getting evicted next month. And so something I've been really thinking about and more feeling, I guess, than thinking is how much evictions and displacement there is in Vancouver. Um, how that has a very long history as well here. Being on stolen land is sort of the whole premise of Vancouver is displacement, and that is very strong today. Um, yeah, so when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about in this little space I was given, it it was a bit hard to think about because I feel like it's been a pretty difficult time for me and my community. Um, I'm I'm queer, and I've been connected to queer communities in Vancouver for a good while, especially for how young I am. Um, and yeah, especially this last week, I don't know, Canada Day is, I think, a really difficult day for a lot of people. I don't know how it feels for all of you. I know it's always a hard conversation with my mom being an immigrant. She feels a lot of um, obligation towards Canada and what it provided for her. Um, but as someone who's lived here most of my life, um, I feel like I've seen a lot more of the problems than she has. Um, and then the day after Canada Day on the 2nd, a friend of my friend um, tried to commit suicide. And so I was in like support mode, trying to help my friend and figure out what we could actually do. And fortunately, the person is okay, um, in however you can be okay. Um, but yeah, that feels sort of like the context that I'm coming from, where we're at. Um, yeah, um, being a young person in Vancouver is very difficult. Um, and I think that can sort of make pride a difficult concept to engage with. Like, what does it mean to be proud when I'm not really thinking about that right now, right? I'm thinking about where I'm living, what I'm losing, and moving out of this house. This house has been a queer collective for over 15 years. And so, what is being lost in an eviction is much, much bigger than me. I've only been here less than a year. Um, so, yeah. Um, yeah, I haven't been sure how to talk about pride, um, because I think we're really focused on other things right now. Um, yeah, but I really appreciate spaces like this, especially the opportunity to speak. Um, I think a lot of so I grew up. I would never know what to say in my bio or to describe my relationship to faith because while my mom's side is Eastern Orthodox, they're Bulgarian. It's very culturally where they're coming from. Um, my mom grew up during communism, so her relationship to it is very disrupted. And then my dad's side is Quaker, but he himself is very atheist, kind of anti-theist, anti-religion. So the actual home I grew up in was very secular and honestly quite anti-theist, um, anti-religion. Like, so I haven't been like in religious communities for like most of my life. I'm much more connected to queer communities in that way. But coming into religious communities sort of in the last few years has been really interesting to see how queerness fits into that or it doesn't. I think a lot of the time people's base understanding of queerness and faith is that they are kind of like oil and water. You can try to mix them, but it's always something that you're actively having to put force into. Um, and as a queer person of faith, that's very far from my experience. Um, when I lived in Scotland, I was part of a queer interfaith group, and something we talked about all the time was feeling like when we were in faith spaces, we couldn't bring our queerness, and when we were in queer spaces, we couldn't bring our faith because of this conception that they are oil and water. Um, and it means that even when I am in faith spaces, and even faith spaces that are affirming and very actively trying to be welcoming to queer people, they still have this sort of background conception that they're separate, so that they're inviting me in, they're making a space for the queerness, but they don't actually see how queerness is a part of faith and it's a part of what they're doing. Um, so while I was in Scotland, I had the opportunity to go to Iona, which is an island off the west coast of Scotland. I don't know if people are familiar with it. It's an amazing place. It's been a religious site for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, a very long time. It used to be a really important Celtic Christian monastery, and now it's got a modern um, Christian, but not a specific church uh, movement based in the historic monastery. And I was able to stay there for a week. And I felt very welcomed. Um, but there was a moment where we were going through exercises um, about how different parts of our body could um, be connected to faith or used to um, worship or praise God or something along those lines. And at one point, they were like, okay, so your lips, what do you use your lips for when you're worshiping? And some people said singing, praying. Um, and I said kissing. And they were all very surprised. And the person leading was like, oh, I've never had someone say that before. Um, and I thought that was really interesting because to me, I really like that exercise because I think physicality is really core to my relationship to faith. And I think I get that from queer communities. Um, and so for me, kissing feels like a very natural way of praising and loving. Also, being Eastern Orthodox, kissing icons, like that's pretty core to the faith as well. Um, but I think there's a way that this physicality isn't fully incorporated into a lot of, especially like Christian faiths. Even though I think they're trying, right? This whole exercise is about embodying what parts of your body do you use. There's still a way that when something gets a little too physical, they're not comfortable with it. Um, and I think that speaks to what I'm talking about of how faith has queerness in it and queerness like they go together as who we deeply are is related to our faith, so is queerness. Um, thank you.